All right, so the first thing we need to take a look at is what ADB is and how it works. And this is going to be quite important, as you'll see before we actually get our hands dirty. It will explain quite a bit of things that we need to understand before you can actually get started tinkering with ADB. All right, so what exactly is ADB? Well, ADB stands for the Android Debug Bridge, which is quite self-explanatory, all right, but I'll explain it a little bit more. All right, so ADB is a command line tool that allows you to communicate with a device, and it is primarily used for debugging. All right, so ADB facilitates a variety of device functions such as installing and debugging applications, and it also provides you access to a Unix shell that you can then use to run a variety of commands on a particular device. All right, now this again should be noted as being one of the main reasons why attackers really like using ADB, and I'll explain its versatility in a while. And for two reasons, as I've explained, why it's extremely popular for attackers or might be very lucrative for them. First of all, it allows you to install and debug applications, and depending on how you configure it, this can be done remotely as well. And it also gives you access to a Unix shell that you can also use to run a variety of commands on your device, as we'll look at later on in the video. All right, now how does ADB work? All right, so ADB work is primarily built upon the client-server model of communication. And there are three elements to that communication, and I'll explain the one that is added to ADB. All right, so you have your client. The client is used to send commands, and it essentially runs on your computer or on the host. All right, you then have the ADB daemon, or it is also known as the ADBD. All right, and this runs on the target device in the background as a service, and it is responsible for executing commands on the target device. All right, it's quite important to understand that bit, and I'll explain it a little bit more in a second. You then have your server. The server runs in the background of the host computer or the attacker's computer. All right, and many of you have been asking me to essentially illustrate a lot of my videos and to use illustrations to explain quite a few things. All right, and that's primarily what I'm going to be doing. All right, so as I've mentioned, we are running a client server here. All right, so this is a client server model. And apologies for my bad handwriting, guys. I'm still getting used to using a graphics tablet for my videos. But in any case, you have your particular PC here, or the attacker's computer. And the attacker's computer, we then have, whoops, sorry about that. Let me just get the lines nice and straight. You then have your droid here. We'll just call this our droid. And we have our PC here, right? So this is going to be the attacker's computer, and that's going to be the droid here. So I'll just line that up. And the communication, as we know, is both ways, where we have the ADB commands being sent. And so again, we can just note that down here. We have the ADB commands. Let me just get rid of that. I have text to shape here enabled. So we have our ADB commands that are going to be sent to the droid, and then we have the response that is going to be sent back to the PC. However, most of the execution will be done on the droid here, which is what we want. Now, it is to be noted that the connection is facilitated A by USB and B, A by USB and B by TCP. All right, so it is done either by USB or TCP. And for those of you who are Android developers, you already know that the primary method that is used is via USB. And this, of course, changes when you use TCP, which is what we're going to be looking at as well. All right, now, as I mentioned, a very interesting component runs on the target device, or on the Android device rather, and that is the ADB daemon. All right, so you have your ADB daemon here, and this runs in the background. All right, and this is responsible for all command execution, all right, or any execution of commands or installation of applications, and the ADB daemon is responsible for that. All right, now the server, the ADB server, runs on the PC. All right, and the ADB server again is going to be quite important to what we are doing here. So we have the ADB server here. Let me just write my B correctly. And that runs here. And your ADB server, as I've mentioned, runs on the host in the background, and it will act as a proxy between ADB clients and the ADB daemon, or the communication between the ADB client and the ADB daemon. I'll explain this in a second. I know that sounds a little bit complex. Let me just get rid of that really absurd line there. All right, so you now have your ADB client here. All right, so ADB client, and we have that running here, and these two communicate with each other, and this is very important to note. and they only communicate with each other through port 5037. That is something to be noted quite importantly here. Let me just write that port down correctly so I'm not confusing this with anything else. So 5037. All right, so let me explain what happens here. All right, so you have your PC and you have your Android device. The communication is initiated or is made through USB or TCP. Those are both the protocols that can be used to essentially connect these two devices to each other. And of course, when you move into TCP, this can also be done remotely, and that's where things get quite interesting. So what happens is when you first start the client on your host, all right, it will check whether there's an existing ADB process running. That's very important. If there isn't one, it will then start the ADB server. All right, so if there isn't one, it starts the ADB server. Now, when the server process starts, it binds the local TCP port, which is 5037, and then listens for commands from the ADB client. So again, as I've mentioned over here, it will essentially bind the port 5037 and then will wait for instructions from the ADB client that is running on the host. All right. Now the ADB client will always use the port 5037 to communicate with the ADB server. All right. So once that connection is initiated, we already know that the ADB server will wait for any instructions being sent by the client. So the server will now attempt to connect to any and all running devices, and it does this by scanning the ports from the range of 5555 all the way to about 5585. So 5585, and all the connected devices will be assigned these ports. And of course, if you're using USB, it's quite different. However, essentially, it is going, the ADB server scans all of this port range and will essentially connect to any of the device's particular ADB daemon. All right, and it will set up a connection to that port. All right, so the connection is very simple. Let me just summarize what we've taken a look at so far. All right, so the ADB client will essentially check for an existing ADB process running, ADB server process. If there isn't one, it will create the ADB server process. When the server process starts, it will bind to a local port, which is, we already know, is 5037, and then will listen for commands sent from the ADB client. All right, so it will wait for commands being sent. Once it receives the commands, it then sends these commands to the target device, which is running the ADB daemon, which is ready to receive these commands and then performs all the necessary execution or installing of apps. All right, so on the Droid, this is the critical component here. The ADB daemon is very important for connections here. All right. On your PC, the ADB server and ADB client share equal importance here and are very, very important, as we'll take a look at. All right, so now that we've understood how ADB works, let us now get our hands dirty and take a look at all the various ways an attacker could potentially exploit the ADB port and how it can all be done remotely as well. All right, so let's get started. Alright, so let us take a look at the required tools we will be needing for this particular video. In our case, or in the first case, we are going to need the latest SDK platform tools that does contain ADB, Fastboot, and System Trace, which are really good. But again, that is beyond the scope of this video, and Android does a fantastic job of making sure these tools are all updated and any issues are fixed. Alright, so this can be found under developer.android.com. Under Studio Releases and Platform Tools. The link will be in the description section. So this gives you three options. You can download the SDK platform tools for Windows, Mac, or Linux. So whatever operating system you're running, you should be good to go. All right, so I'm currently running Windows. I'm going to just specify Windows and accept the license agreements. Make sure you go through them if you do want to. And I'm just going to hit download, and it's going to prompt me to download a zip file right over here. So I'm just going to wait for that to complete. And once that is done, we can actually get started with configuring them. Alright, so once the tools are downloaded, you can now extract them to whatever directory you feel is comfortable for yourself. Make sure you remember the directory because it'll be quite important. So if we open up the folder, let me just drag that right over here so you can see it. And let me just expand that. Alright, so we have our platform tools here. And within the platform tools, you can see we have all the executables that we require. We have ADB, we have the deployment agent. We also have the Fastboot tool right over here, which is quite important if you are an Android developer. However, to actually execute this, we can essentially right click here and we can open up a PowerShell window here. Or if you prefer to use a command prompt, you can also do that as well. However, you can also use the command prompt from within the Windows PowerShell, as I'll show you in a second here. So there we are within the platform tools, and if we type in cmd, we should have a command prompt within the PowerShell. So if we list the directory now, we can see that we have fastboot, and this is primarily where we will be executing fastboot and using it to our advantage. All right, so now that we have actually seen how to get the platform tools onto your respective platform, let's talk about the debugging settings within Android, and we can actually get started with demonstrating how it works on both USB and via Wi-Fi or a local network, or rather TCP. All right, so let's head on over to my screen. Okay, so you should see my screen any moment now, and I'm currently in my Android developer options here. And under my developer options, I have a subsection called Android debugging. All right, and we are going to be taking a look at USB debugging first. We'll then take a look at how to do this over the internet or over your local network. So the first thing we want to do is enable USB debugging. All right, once we hit OK, we will now be prompted to actually allow the connection to this particular computer in a second. So while that is recording, if we simply type in our command prompt right over here, if we type in ADB devices, we should be able to see the connected device in a second. All right, and on our Android device, we should see the message telling us here. So I'm always going to allow connections from this computer, and we then have the list of devices attached. All right, now once we have essentially established that there is or are any ADB devices, we can now connect to these particular devices and perform a large variety of functions, and a large variety of commands can be executed on them. So for example, I can type in, if I wanted to sort of upload a file to that particular device, I could type in ADB push, and then I specify the file. However, we're going to be taking a look at all of these commands in the final stage of the video, where we actually look at how much you can use ADB for exploitation, right? So let's take a look at the next stage, where we'll be taking a look at how to connect your Android device, via ADB over the internet, over your local network. Okay, now that we've taken a look at how to essentially connect to ADB via USB, let us take a look at how to do this over your local network or on Wi-Fi, which will really shed some light on how it's going to work remotely. So again, we're going to be using the same set of tools. We simply need to be in the platform tools folder here in your command prompt, or you can also use PowerShell if you so please. And you need to connect your device via USB one more time, and you need to make sure USB debugging is enabled. So if you follow the steps in the previous video, you should be good to go. So the first thing we need to run now is we need to make sure we have the device connection. So I'm just going to type ADB devices, and yes, we do have the device attached via USB, and now we need to enable ADB TCP IP. All right, so this will essentially allow us to run ADB on that particular target device on a particular port. The port ranges I had specified in the previous video. So that is port 5555 to 585. All right, so to do this, we simply say ADB TCP IP, and we type in the port we want to bind it to. I'm just going to hit enter, and it's going to restart in TCP mode on the port 5555. All right, now you need to connect to the to that device with its IP address and this port. All right, and to do that, we type in ADB connect, the IP address and the port. All right, so you can now disconnect your USB cable, and I'm going to do that right now. All right, and I'm just going to type in ADB devices one more time, just to make sure. So there we are, we can see we have that attachment. However, to connect it, we simply type in ADB connect. All right, and ADB connect, then the IP address. In my case, the IP address of my mobile device is 192.168.1.100, and the port you had specified within the port range. That is something very important, and it's going to tell us already connected via Wi-Fi, and I'm currently not connected via USB, as you pretty much will already be told, and I think I can show that right now. So there you are, I have no Android device connected right over here. So now we can start performing a wide variety of ADB commands. So again, we can type in ADB install, we can install various packages, we can also use the file manager functions. So again, we can type things, for example, like ADB shell IP, and we hit enter, and there you are, you have additional usage here. All right, so now that we've taken a look at how it works, let us now take a look at how to use phonesploit to exploit ADB completely, and we'll take a look at all the relevant ADB commands that can aid you in exploitation or remote exploitation. Alright, so I'll see you in the next segment. Alright, so we are in the final segment of the video, and in this particular segment we're going to be looking at the overall exploitability of ADB using a variety of tools, and we're going to see how this can lead to further exploitation. Alright, so the tool we'll be using or utilizing in this particular case is going to be phonesploit. Alright, so the link to the GitHub repository will be in the description. You can take a look at all the features. And as I was saying in the previous segment, with the various ADB commands, you can perform quite a bit of functions. You can perform quite a bit of stuff on the phone. However, this tool actually gives you more functionality in regards to getting a shell on the device. So you can do quite a bit remotely. And mind you, I am still running ADB over Wi-Fi on my device currently. So I'll show you how to set it up and all of that. So you can run phonesploit on Windows and Linux. I'm going to be running it on Kali Linux, as you can probably see. And in regards to the overall exploitability, I'll show you a few cool things you can do on Shodan to actually find devices that have ADB exposed over the internet, and the fact that you can exploit them. However, I'm not going to be covering it because of YouTube's community guidelines, and those devices are not mine to exploit. So that's beyond the scope here. I'm simply going to be covering it on my device. And mind you, as I said, this is done over Wi-Fi, and can lead to further exploitation. So you can clone the repository. I've done it on my desktop, and on Linux it's very, very simple. All you need to do is make sure you have ADB installed. You can use the aptitude package manager, so sudo apt-get install ADB, install ADB, and that's very, very simple to do on Linux, and there you are. And to get started, we can simply type in Python and main linux.py. all right, and once we hit enter, it's going to ask us whether we already have ADB installed. I'm just going to hit yes, I do. It's going to start the ADB server, restart. It's going to restart it in on that particular port. And again, if you don't have the ADB daemon running, it's going to start that running for you. You then have your first option, which is showing the currently connected devices. You have the second one to disconnect all devices. You have your third option to connect a new phone. You can access a shell on a phone. You can install an APK on a phone. You can record the phone. You can screen record it. You can record. You can take a screenshot. You can restart the server. You can pull folders from the phone to a PC. You can turn the device off, uninstall an app, show real time log of the device, dump system info, list all apps on a phone, and run an app. So you can see that we have a ton of functionality here. So the first thing I want to do is I want to connect a new phone. All right, so it's going to tell me error, no devices or emulators found. Connect a phone. So I'm going to hit 192.168.1.100. that is the IP address of my device. All right, so I'm just going to hit enter, and as you can see, for some reason it's telling us that there is no particular. All right, so I do not need to specify the port there, so I'm going to hit enter, and there we are. All right, so can I use variables here? No. All right, so I'll just show the connected devices, and for some reason it's telling us we do not have any connected devices. So I'll just try and connect a new device again. All right, so I'll just wait for that right over here. Connect a new device, 192.168.1.100. Hit enter, and let me just list that one more time. All right, so there we are. So we can see immediately that we have my device here, and it is running on this particular IP and that particular port, and we're ready to go. All right, so now we can get started with the additional functionality. So the first thing you can do is you can again disconnect all devices, connect a new phone. You can access a shell, although it may be restrictive. It is a shell irregardless. So I'm just going to hit option 4, enter the device name. This is going to be 0.1.100. Oops, sorry, that is 100, and the port is 5555. Hit enter, and immediately we get a shell on the device. So who am I? You can see we are shell. If we type in ID, you have the various user IDs on that particular system. If I type in my current working directory, I'm in the home or the root of the device, not the root directory, but the root of the device. So if I list all the files here, you can see for some files like the initialize scripts, we do not have access to view it. We do not have appropriate permissions to view them. So we have access to the root directory, the storage, the SD card. So for example, if I go into SD card here, and if we list the files in there, you can see I have all the various directories on my particular phone. I'll obviously blur them, but that's how to actually get a shell on the phone. And right from here, you can already see the amount of access you get. So I'm just going to exit here. So let's take a look at some of the additional functionality and where I think you can really perform quite a bit of malice, and that is from installing an APK on a phone. So again, you can install an APK on a phone. If I hit option 5, it's going to specify the device name here. So it's going to prompt us to specify the device name. I'm going to hit enter. It's going to then ask you to specify the APK location. In my case, I'm not specifying. I'm not going to specify any particular directory. I know it's told you here that the file name does not exist, and there is an issue with the script where it tells you that the APK has been installed. In any case, if once you have the APK installed, if you're installing a payload, you can then execute it. All right, so you can take a look at other bits of functionality like screen recording the phone or taking a screenshot. So 192.168.1.100 and 5555, hit enter, root desktop, and we should get a screenshot. So there we are. We were able to get the screenshot pulled and onto our desktop here, and my screen currently is locked. So let's try that one more time with the screen unlocked. All right, so I'll just close this up and we'll get an additional screenshot here, and we will now get a new screenshot here. So we're going to say option 7, and let me just copy the device name, which is really the IP and its corresponding port that is listening on. Paste that in there, and we'll wait for a connection. And there we are. Looks like we got a screenshot this time, and immediately you can see that we were successfully able to get a screenshot of my device here, which is pretty cool. And you can also do the same for recording the screen. Oops, sorry about that. That's not where I wanted to go. So if you take a look at the options here, it does give you a ton of functionality. So you can restart the server, pull folders from the phone to the PC. You can also turn the device off, uninstall an app, show a real-time log. So let's try and view the log here. With a traditional ADB, you can also view the system processes that are currently running. So there we are. You can see a log here. So these are all the logs on that particular device, which is pretty cool. And I'm not going to get into all the functionality, but that's totally up to you here. So let me just terminate that. So it's all up to you and all in regards to what you want to do. Now, a lot of people are going to ask me, well, what is really awesome about this if you can get a hold of someone's mobile device, right? So that's where, exploitation of tools or using tools like Shodan. Let me just open up Shodan here. So if you use Shodan, you can actually find Android devices all around the world that have ADB enabled and exposed over the internet. So if I'm just to demonstrate this for you, you can say something like Android Debug Bridge, and already have the search term here. And immediately we get devices that are currently open to be accessed. And it's very interesting to see the type of devices that you're able to access. So for example, if we open up this one right over here, and I'm not going to exploit it because I know YouTube really doesn't like that. So you can see it's in Sweden, and you have the ISP there, the latest update. And it's currently running on an Android TV box, I believe, and it gives you the information about the box, which is really interesting because if you view the results on Shodan, you can see that most of these devices that are exposing ADB over the internet are Android boxes, right? Which again is something that I want to research quite a bit because I don't really use Android boxes I haven't even used one. In this case, we have a Pixel 2 XL. I'm not sure what device this is. So you can Google search the device names here. Again, this is another, it looks like a Max TV or something. Yeah, Max TV. It looks like a weird Android TV again, an IPTV receiver. So yeah, there we go. We can see that this is the model there. In any case, you can take a look at the model here. So that is a Vision TV. Let's see what other types of devices. All right, we also have a Samsung device here, and traditionally you would be asking, well, how do you exploit this? Well, very simple. Since you can access it over the internet, you can essentially just connect to its IP, and the port is already specified. So if I were to hypothetically connect, I would essentially connect a new device, and I would add that IP, and I would be able to exploit it. Now, as I said, I'm not going to be doing that because YouTube doesn't like it, and I'm not going to encourage you guys to do that yourselves. I'm simply just demonstrating this for educational purposes. With that out of the way, that's pretty much all that I wanted to cover in this video. Let me know what you guys think, whether you enjoyed the video. If you have any feedback, let me know in the comments section on my social networks or at the forum at hackersploit.org, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video. Peace.